Hey everyone, Dr. Josh Mattson here with Infinity Chiropractic Center. I'm going to talk about what the purpose of primitive reflexes are. Because a lot of people ask me, a lot of patients and their kids are, they're over a year old and they still have primitive reflexes that aren't developing the way they should. And they go, why do they have the primitive reflexes in the first place? What's the purpose of them? What do they do? So I'm going to explain. When you're born or before you're born in the womb, you develop a set of reflexes because when we're born, we really don't have the brains developed to function in everyday life. Our frontal lobes, there is up here that help us to communicate, that help us to move, that help us to do all those things. They're not developed. We're really only born with an area down here. It's called your brainstem that's actually developed, and that's what controls your heart rate. That's what controls your respiratory rate. It's what controls the things that allow you to survive. And also, this is where your primitive reflexes are mediated. It's where they sit. It's where they're at. But we're born with this amazing set of primitive reflexes that is designed to help us to survive in the first year of life. So we have what's called the rooting reflex, that we open our mouth and turn, an infant does, opens their mouth, turn, and they start to suck. This is what gives them the ability to feed, so they're born with an innate ability and innate knowledge of how to feed, and they don't need to have a developed brain to do that. They have a grasping reflex, so everyone knows you stick your finger in a baby's hand and they grasp down, and that allows them to grab onto things. If they're falling, they can grab stuff. It's a survival mechanism. They're born with a moral reflex, which is a startle reflex, that when they move too quickly, their arms come out. Like if they got dropped from something, their arms would go out to catch onto something, and then they would have a grasping reflex to grab onto it to save their life. That's the purpose of these reflexes. So to really survive, to feed, and to start movement is what these reflexes are for. And we utilize these reflexes to start the development of the rest of the brain. So I often explain it as you stick your finger in a baby's hand, they close down, they close down, they close down. And the purpose of that is they close down, they start building pathways into their brain. Their brain develops to a certain point where it says, hey, you know what? I know how to use my hand now. I don't need this reflex anymore. Let's get rid of it. So in the first year of life, primitive reflexes are vital for our brain to start to develop things like hand movement, to start to develop feeding, to start to develop movement of your head and your arms and your body together. So connecting your extremities with your head movements. They help you to do a lot of things in the first year of life, and they're really important for that. And if they don't develop appropriately, though, they don't go away when they're supposed to, they become a hindrance. They stop us from developing appropriately. For example, there's a reflex called an asymmetrical tonic neck reflex that when you turn an infant before 6 months, you turn their head to one side. The side you turn their head to, they should extend everything on that side, and they should flex everything on this side. That helps them to develop, when their hand extends out and they look at it, it helps them to develop a connection of hand-eye coordination to develop that. But this becomes an issue is if that doesn't go away right around that 6 month mark. What happens is that child can no longer, or they can't develop a crawling pattern, because to crawl, you have to be able to turn your head to one way and extend your arm on the opposite side. So if that reflex doesn't go away, it affects how a child develops crawling. There's other reflexes, like on your feet, for example, that they help us to develop the muscles of our feet before we start to walk so that we can develop the muscles and they can be in place before we start to walk. Well, if it doesn't go away, it creates a hindrance in walking. It creates that every time their feet touches, their toes come up. It's called the Babinski response. So there's reflexes and they all have their certain time period that help us to meet that, the army crawling stages, to help us to meet the crawling stages, to help us to meet the walking stages and all those milestones right on time and help us to hit speech on time. There's reflexes for all that to help us do that. But if they don't develop like they're supposed to, they don't go away at the right times because a kid isn't developing appropriately, then they become a battle that child's body has to fight. And it can create skipping in the eyes and create reading issues, learning issues. It can create behavioral issues just because it makes things just inefficient. So that's the purpose of them, though. The purpose of primitive reflexes is to help our brains to develop to the point where we can use them and we can develop appropriate movements is the biggest thing. So I hope this helps you guys. Have an awesome day, and we'll talk to you soon.